Welcome to Opposition Territory here at the Philadelphia Sports Table Podcast Show, the longest running weekly Philly sports podcast show in the world. 12 years strong. We got a great guest joining our Opposition Territory show this week, coming to us from RoyalsReview.com, great SB Nation site, to dive into the Kansas City Royals, what they're doing this season, how their season looks, and what the outlook is for this team. We've got the one and only Matthew LaMar. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. Ready to talk about Royals. It hasn't always been that way in years past, but the last couple of years have been good to us. So
yeah,
happy to talk.
It is great to have you on, buddy. And I got to tell you right now, this is the first time that we're doing an Opposition Territory show in all the years that we have been doing this for like well over probably a decade here at this point, that we're actually talking about the Royals. So I can't wait to get into this team with you, because they've always been, look, I have not been to every single Major League Baseball stadium, but I have been out at the Royals Stadium, and it was such an amazing experience. It was many, many years ago, probably 15 years ago at this point. What an amazing stadium to be at. It was the most amazing experience where I was actually like sipping on a blue moon, watching a fantastic baseball game, and watching Zach Greinke break the strikeouts record for the Royals franchise. It was that game, and it was freaking awesome. It was fantastic. So it's great to have you on. Let's get into the pitching of this Royals team right off the bat here, because Kris Bubic is certainly killing it with his 1.66 ERA this season. We've got Michael Lorenzen having a really nice season as well. How would you rate the Royals starting pitching performance so far this season? Say from a score of 1 to 10, how would you score this starting pitching staff and their performance here, and why?
Yeah, so I would definitely say probably like a 9. They have been really, really good. You're right. Kris Bubic, Michael Wacha, Cole Ragans, those three. Seth Lugo, right? Seth Lugo was runner-up in the Cy Young.
Yeah.
And Cole Ragans was another top 5 finisher. Like that, they've done really, really well. Ragans, Awaka, and Lugo continuing to do well from last year is not very surprising, but you see with injuries all over the place, and we've seen some time here. Currently, Ragans and Lugo are on the injured list, but
yeah,
they'll be back relatively soon. But it's hard, right? And to have
depth is important. Yeah, depth is important.
Yeah, and to have a healthy rotation is really great. I think you're right in highlighting Kris Bubic, because he is the guy that really has taken the next step. Really hard for Lugo to take another step. I mean, like winning the Cy Young, but
right.
Reagan's also very good, right? When like that, but they're already really near the top. Wacha, he's a really good veteran pitcher. He's probably not going to take another step at this point in his career. Bubic, yeah, he's been really, really good, which is really, really good to see, because a couple of years ago he had Tommy John surgery, and before he had Tommy John surgery, we were seeing some glimpses when he was a starter that he was becoming this kind of pitcher, and this really dominant pitcher. He's added a couple of pitches, the sweeper, which is no pun intended, like sweeping baseball world.
Yeah.
He's added one of those. He's monkeyed with his changeup a little bit. So he's done some good things. Overall, the pitching is absolutely the strength of the team, and historically, that hasn't really been the case. I mean, you mentioned Zach Greinke. Zach Greinke for a long time was the only real internally developed pitcher, and for whatever reason, the front office couldn't find guys at reasonable prices to do well for a long time. So Royals fans are not used to seeing this good pitching. I fear that we are getting too used to it too fast, but it is what it is. They've been really great. So 9 out of 10.
9 out of 10. All right.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Very good. Well, as we're moving along here, I want to talk about one particular individual that's really given some depth, I think, to the starting rotation for the Royals. And it's about a gentleman you recently wrote about, who we know a lot about in Philadelphia, and that's Michael Lorenzen. He's had an interesting career, for sure. He's been on more than a few teams here. And again, as I mentioned before, we saw him in Philadelphia. He was a member of this Phillies team in recent years, but he's really been a big part of the Royals starting pitching depth. And part of why this starting pitching rotation has really had a productive season. So I'm wondering, based on what you had written about Michael Lorenzen, can you talk about what you've been seeing from him on the mound and how he could be that real key contributor to the team this season?
Yeah, Lorenzen's been a real key, as you said, like a really important pitcher because one of the Royals starting pitchers from last year who did well, Alec Marsh, started the season on the injured list. He's still on the injured list. He's working his way back. So the Royals needed somebody to fill that spot really until Marsh was back. And Lorenzen has absolutely been that guy. And it's just sort of wild that the Royals really got Lorenzen for nothing essentially last year, and Lorenzen, all he has done has been really, really, really good. And offered great depth. Now, is he as dominant as Reagan's or Luke? Like, no, but
right.
It's okay. You don't need your fifth starter to be dominant. You need them to get through innings. And his last two starts, he went through 7 innings apiece. Like he's been really, really solid. One thing about Lorenzen that's something to keep an eye on as we move forward. All pitchers have differences between the first time through the order, second time through the order, third time through the order. Lorenzen, it's really pronounced. So his WOBA that he's been giving up the first time through the order is 239. That's great. If you don't know what WOBA is, that's great. It goes down to 367 the second time and 390 the third time.
Wow.
And so that sort of speaks to his career as mostly a reliever, right? And that he has been able to start games with enough of a repertoire. But I think that his floor really is that even, let's say, if Marsh comes back and takes his spot in the rotation, I think Lorenzen will still be able to be a contributor in the bullpen because he's been really good that first time through the order. Less so the second, third time. That's okay. But he's been sort of a real pivot pitcher, I guess, for lack of a better term, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's just really important. And the Royals got him for basically nothing. And this is the type of pitcher that the previous Royals front office just could not acquire. They just could not acquire stable, good, decent innings out of their fourth and fifth starters. And that's what Lorenzen is giving the Royals. And it's so valuable. And it's really great to watch him to pitch. And also he has the biggest biceps that I've ever seen on a human being. It's unbelievable.
The biceps are important for sure.
Yeah,
absolutely. Sure. Yes, absolutely. All right. Well, I want to keep talking about the pitching here for the Royals. Like you said, I mean, it really is the strength of this team here in 2025. And when we look at this pitching depth and the fact that they really need to be competitive over the course of this entire season here, again, it is their strength, but this team does have some weaknesses as well. Even though they're fourth in the AL Central, I'm wondering, do you think this starting pitching staff do you think they can just rise to the occasion to be competitive during the entire course of the season to keep the team where they need to be, at least to be competitive in the AL Central? What are your thoughts here?
That's the trick. The rotation was really good last year. Mostly the same guys. This year, I think what's better about it is they've got some depth. So Kyle Wright should be back at some point this year. They acquired him a couple years ago from Atlanta. Alec Marsh, who did pitch last year. Noah Cameron is another guy. He has had 2 really, really good starts. I think he's allowed 2 hits in his first 2 MLB starts as a rookie, which is sort of unheard of.
Yeah.
It's really solid. So I think the Royals are better from a depth-wise point of view than last year. What I'm worried about is that last year they were all really, really healthy. They had 5 pitchers start at least 24 games, and they only had 6 or 7 pitchers, starting pitchers overall. That's really hard to replicate, especially when you think of who is pitching, right? You have Seth Lugo, you have Michael Walker. These are guys into their mid-30s. You have Cole Reagans. He's had 2 Tommy John surgeries already. You have Lorenzen, who has been pretty good, but as we've said, is really a bullpen guy who is outdoing his role as opposed to the other way around. And so I worry that they won't be able to withstand another year where they're able to stay healthy. And we've already seen that a little bit. Reagan's missed to start a couple of weeks ago because of a groin strain, and Noah Cameron did a great job. But guess what? Reagan's is on the injured list. Now Seth Lugo is on the injured list. The good news is that these aren't like, arm injuries. Lugo's for like a finger sort of sprain, and Reagan's is a groin sprain. These aren't like, oh no, the UCL is going to come off, or something like that. But like, it's really hard to keep continually healthy. And we've even seen that from Alec Marsh, right? Alec Marsh hasn't pitched, in months. Kyle Wright has been injured the whole time the Royals have had him. And so the strength of the team is the starting pitching. If the starting pitching is not good, the team will fall apart really quickly. And so that depth is going to be really, really, really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, folks, we are talking to Matt LaMar from RoyalsReview.com, great SB Nation site. Matt, where can folks find you on the social medias out there, on the interwebs, if they want to follow you and follow everything that's going on that you guys cover over at Royals Review?
Yeah, for sure. So you can follow us on Twitter and Blue Sky at Royals Review. You can follow me at Blue Sky at Matt LaMar over there at the not Twitter.
Yes.
I have a Twitter. You can follow me there, but I haven't posted in a long time.
All right. Sounds good. All right. Sounds good. Well, look, I want to stick with the pitching here but I want to get into the bullpen aspect of where the Royals are currently at. And if I'm not mistaken, the Royals bullpen ERA ranks about 5th in Major League Baseball, a strong bullpen. They're so important and critical in terms of this team's success here. Just name a couple of guys, John Schreiber, Steven Cruz, have been looking really good out of the bullpen for the Royals this season. What has this Royals bullpen meant to the team here in 2025?
It's been really big. Last year about this time, the Royals bullpen was really bad. It was really bad. And the problem was they didn't have really those power arms who could strike out pitchers or strike out batters. And so they didn't really have a closer. And so what that meant was that guys were sort of pitching out of their roles, right? Like a guy like John Schreiber, mid-innings guy, great 7th inning guy, maybe not the best 8th or 9th inning guy.
Yeah.
Right? And so what the Royals did at mid-season and in the offseason is they acquired a couple of guys to slot in sort of later, which pushed everybody else down a little bit more into their roles that sort of suited them. So you mentioned Steven Cruz. Steven Cruz has been really, really good. Schreiber has been solid. The big name in the bullpen on the back end is Carlos Esteves, who is the closer. He's been good. He hasn't been like great, but he's been good and reliable, which is something that, not every team can say.
Yeah, absolutely.
The real gem is a guy named Lucas Erceg. So Lucas Erceg has a really inspiring story from, he was a former hitter, and he spent time in the minor leagues as a hitter and then converted to being a pitcher. And then the pandemic hit, and during that time, like, he was an alcoholic and got sober and switched full time into pitching. And so he's sort of really like later in his career. He's 30, but he's got like 100-mile-an-hour fastball. Like, he's really, really good and has been like the best pitcher. If you remember the sort of last Royals great team in 2014, 2015, reminds me a lot of Wade Davis, right? And that guy, he's not the closer. He's the most talented guy in the bullpen. He's going to come in. He's going to strike batters out. He's going to get out of jams. And that's really, really, really important. Sometimes he'll even pitch the 9th inning if that sort of lines up with the top of the order, or the most important part of the order. So he's really the key there. Hunter Harvey, who the Royals acquired last July, has been good when he's been healthy, and he hasn't been healthy a lot, but he has been good when he has been healthy. So hopefully, if the Royals make the playoffs, he'll be there as well. But you're right. Like, that's like last year, the starting pitching was great. Bullpen was leaky, and that's never a good thing to have a guy go 7 innings, give up a run,
right,
and then the guy comes in the 8th inning and the game's over because he gives up 5 runs. That's probably the worst feeling in baseball, I think.
Absolutely.
Blow it.
Yep, absolutely. All right. Well, Matt, let's head over to the batting and the offense and what we've been seeing here. I know it's a general question, but are the Royals bats and offense, are they meeting the preseason expectations thus far here in 2025? And again, I know it's an overall general type of question, but are they meeting the expectations that you all had for this team coming into the season?
I would say yes ish. Yes, in that we knew that they would be bad, just to be frank.
Right.
Ish because they've been even worse than expected. So it's like, yeah, we know that they'd be bad. It was just a question of how bad, and the answer is very bad. Um, so the Royals have Bobby Witt Jr., who, if not for Aaron Judge, would be the far and away best player in the American League. Witt's great. Witt's going to be one of the best Royals players when it's all said and done. He's been very good. Michael Garcia, third baseman, he has turned a corner and is really solid this year and has been sort of what his tools have suggested that he could be. So he's been really, really fun to watch. He's got a good personality. He's very passionate. Outside of that, it's been pretty bad. Just to give you a couple of stats here. So the Royals have played 48 games. As we're talking, they're 26 and 22. They're going to play later tonight on the West Coast. So the Royals have played 48 games. They have scored 3 or fewer runs in 65% of their games.
Wow.
Which is crazy. They have scored 2 or fewer runs in over 40% of their games.
Wow.
So for a team with a winning record, they are often really, really frustrating because you just can't, like, if the other team scores 4 or 5 runs, you're like, that the game is over.
Yeah.
Even if the game is not over, like they have won some of those games, but they've been so consistently scoring 2 runs, 3 runs, and there's no margin for error at all. They've sent MJ Melendez to the minor leagues. I think there's no reason that Hunter Renfroe will survive for another month. He's been really, really bad. But the Royals have also seen, like, Salvador Perez is worse than he was last year. Vinny Pasquantino is worse than he was last year. Michael Massey is worse than he was last year. Jonathan Indria, who the Royals acquired for Brady Singer from the Reds, worse than he was last year. And so everybody's doing worse. And some of those players you maybe can't expect them to improve. Like Salvador Perez is 35. The Royals just had their 10-year celebration of the World Series just yesterday or this weekend, I guess.
Yeah.
Salvador Perez is still playing. Everybody else on that team is like retired, Salvador Perez is still playing. At some point, Salvador Perez is not going to be good anymore because Father Time is undefeated. That's no knock against Salvi. No knock at all. But he's not going to be good forever. If he's not good this year, the Royals needed him to be good this year because they were so thin elsewhere. And so there is one prospect to talk about. His name is Jack Caglione. He was number 6 overall draft pick previous year. He has been just absolutely destroying baseballs in the minor leagues. And the question in Royals land is, okay, when is he gonna, come up to the major league? Should he be already in the major leagues? You have some Royals radio folks who are like, or Kansas City radio folks who are like, he should be here now. The Royals did just promote him to AAA, so he's gonna be in AAA. But for how long, right? I'm sort of on the side that, like, he's been so good and his like exit velocities have been so elite in the minor leagues that there's no way that he's not one of the 26 best players on the roster.
Yeah.
But I understand wanting to make sure that you're not putting him in a position that he's not ready for. I think he's probably ready for it, but it's very little risk to play it safe when it comes to that.
Yeah. Well, before I let you leave here, Matt, I wanted to talk about just, from an overall perspective, again, in terms of this team being competitive in the AL Central, with teams like the Twins and the Tigers, both have a winning record, towards the top of the AL Central. I'm wondering where, and you may have just answered the question, quite frankly, where this Royals team, where they need their biggest improvements as we are here in mid-May, looking towards June and the rest of this Major League Baseball season. Where are the biggest improvements, particularly, that you want to see this Royals team make during this long stretch here?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think the answer is that I suspect the Royals team, if they're in the playoffs, their lineup is going to look a lot different. They're going to have probably 3 different faces, minimum.
Gotcha.
I think Jack Caglione would be one. Whether he debuts in June, July, August, September, like he's probably going to debut sometime this year. That's one. I think they have a couple of interior. Why can't it kind of think? They have their own prospects, a couple of other prospects who aren't like top prospects.
Yeah.
But who can potentially take up one of the spots
In the infield, perhaps?
The infield. Yeah, there's a guy named Nick Lofton who's been doing really well in AAA. I think he could potentially take Michael Massey's spot. Lofton has played in the big leagues in the last 2 years, a little bit here and there. So it's not like it's a totally new debut for him. I also think that the Royals will get at least 1, if not 2 players at the trade deadline. They know that the offense is the biggest area of opportunity. JJ Piccolo, who's the general manager, has been really good at identifying, okay, so we need to do, improve in this way, and going out and improving that in that way, acquiring some players. Last trade deadline was exactly that, right? The Royals needed bullpen help. What did they do? Well, they went out and they got Lucas Erceg. They got Hunter Harvey. They got some guys when they needed to. I think that'll happen this year. I don't know who it will be. Depends. The one thing that Royals fans have a little bit going for them as far as solace for the offensive woes is pretty much every bat that they were linked to last year in free agency has not done well. And so you look at like Jurickson Profar, who got suspended, or you look at some of the other players. Like it's frustrating to watch, but the thing is the team's composition is going to change, and everybody knows that. The trick is, as a fan, if you're watching, you're like, I'm sick of them scoring 2 runs in half of the games. They need to do something. Well, they will do something. And ultimately, the way to think about it is whether they do it in the middle of May or the middle of June, that's not really that much of a difference, especially if the guys who they expected to perform better might be a better option as far as rolling the dice, because it's all about probabilities, right? What's the probability that Vinny Pasquantino is going to be better than some other guy? Well, probably pretty high considering Pasquantino's past performance. And so they've got to be locked in, and like maybe Hunter Renfroe can turn it around. Like he was almost a league average hitter last year. At some point you have to cut bait, but you're weighing those guys against minor league guys and guys from other organizations who you can acquire who are potentially untested. So that's the trick, and that's the one thing that I try to keep in mind when I'm writing articles and whatnot. But again, sometimes it's hard, right? Like the Royals pitching is great. They lose 1-0 games, 2-1 games. Like that's, I think I said earlier that a bullpen giving up hits and giving up like games at the end, that's the worst way to lose a baseball game. The second worst way to lose a baseball game is to barely score and you lose. And it's just like, well, there's no like fun, because part of the fun of baseball is like, oh, they score runs. If they lose 6-4, maybe had a couple of home runs, you got some fun moments. If they lose 2-1, 3-2, like, then it's just not as fun.
And you never know who is going to go on a hot streak at any given point. That's baseball. That is baseball. We say it all the time. Watching the Philadelphia Phillies here at the Philadelphia Sports Table Podcast Show, there are players who are streaky. There are players who are cold for a specific period of time. Players then get hot at the right time. So it's going to be interesting to see where this Royals team goes from here for the rest of the 2025 season. Again, folks, Matt LaMar from RoyalsReview.com over at SB Nation. And buddy, I really appreciate you taking the time. Fantastic discussion. Great talking Royals with you. I'd love to have you back on the show at some point down the road.
Yeah, of course. Just let me know.